Alright, good morning everyone. We are here. Oh, we've done the Raz. We're a step past that. Let me fix that up quickly. And I'll trim the video to this point once we're finished. Alright, we are here. We break 459. It is a 26 League Heroes retail combo break featuring the 26 League Heroes case as well as the 26 League Heroes starter case. Along with those, we have the bonuses, the 26 League Heroes hobby box as well as the 26 NRL sticker album and box combo. They will be randomised at the end of the break between all 17 teams, and that team list for today: Broncos, Dean Mich; Raiders, Peter Lowe; Bulldogs, Peter Lowe; Sharks, Peter Lowe; Dolphins, Dan Cornale. I'm not sure, sorry mate. Titans, Brian Riddell; Manly, Chris Hughes; Storm, Warren Stoddart; Knights, Brian Riddell; Cowboys, Dean Mich; Eels, Craig Hyde; Panthers, Joel Hardie; Rabbitohs, Chris Rose; Dragons, Warren Stoddart; Roosters, Joel Hardie; Warriors, Talia Mayer; Tigers, Joel Hardie. Alright, here we are. You will see that the shelves are getting filled in the background, as well as boxes full of things to go on shelves, and yeah, it's all happening. Let's bring up that YouTube chat and the team list for today, and then we can get stuck in. There we go. Alright. Let me close some windows. I've had some bad weather, and I think that might be playing games with us again today for the stream. So if we are experiencing any issues, please let me know. Yeah, there's not much I can do. We have our bonus sticker box, our bonus 26 League Heroes hobby box, as well as the bonus sticker album. So the winner will receive all three items with their break cards. We will need both of them. Let's get this open. Oh, get in there. There we go. Let's get set. So we'll do them 10 at a time. Alright, it's telling me the stream has improved, so hopefully that's a good sign. In about 61 minutes. Well, we won't find out if we have one for about another, what, 240 minutes. Oh, that was shocking mass. All the big hits, even from the starter packs, are held to the end. And it takes us about 3.5 hours to get to that point. So my final number then of 4 hours is even wrong. That's all right. We don't need to count. We just need to rip. I've lost my team list again. I don't know what happened there. Hopefully we can start by some Rabbitohs League stars out of the starter pack for you, Chris. Alright, here we go. Our first 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Not a fan of this, but I think it's the best thing for the bonus cards in the starter packs. I just hate using scissors, and we've already found out why. Alfiana Campi error for Titans. Balami kick out for the Bulldogs. Terrell May for the Tigers. Sebastian Chris for the Raiders. And number 5, Damien Cook for the Dragons. Tommy Dearden for the Cowboys. Blake Brayley for the Sharks. Harry Grant for the Storm. Well, let's start with actually hitting the golden treasure at the 61-minute mark. Lindsay Collins for the Roosters. James Fisher-Harris for the Warriors. Alright, that's our first 10. Traffic and rain this morning was absolutely shocking. Alright, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Molly Olika R2 for Manly. James Tedesco for the Roosters. Brian Totter for Panthers. Jeremiah Nanai for the Cowboys. Dylan Lucas for the Knights. Cameron Munster for the Storm. RTS for the Warriors. Brighton Niggara for the Sharks. Will Penasini for the Eels. Cameron Murray for the Rabbitohs. Alright, 2 teams left to hit. Hopefully we can rectify that by the end of this next lot. We're doing 5 at a time, we might as well just do them every 5. Will Penasini for the Eels. Cameron Murray for the Rabbitohs. That's not a good start. Alefiana Kampi-Era for Titans. Blimey kick out for the Bulldogs. Terrell May for the Tigers. going to make a mess here shortly. Alright, that's our next 5. Go Broncos, Dolphins. Come on. Where are you hiding? How about the Blues? Let's go. Biggest comeback ever. RTS for the Warriors. I don't know, I look at that in a couple of different ways. Let's be honest, they let the score get there. Cameron Munster for the Storm. Dylan Lucas for the Knights. Jeremiah Nanai for the Cowboys. And I barely seen the beginning, I was asleep in bed. My daughter's messaging mum last night and this morning giving her crap. She was so happy to tell me this morning when I went and got her up out of bed. They won, Dad. And they said it was the biggest comeback ever. The joy in her voice. That was awesome. Yep. Number 5. Lindsay Collins for the Roosters. Fisher Harris for the Warriors. Dylan Edwards for the Panthers. I'm starting to believe that the Broncos and the Dolphins cards are hiding in the packets. Oh, Payne Haas for the Broncos. There we go, breaking the ice. Dolphins left to go. And here we go, Herbie Farnworth for the Dolphins. Alright, 4 teams now at least have 1 in the slot. 5 to go. Alright, this is our last 5 league head stars. Okay, ready to go. Cookie for the Dragons. Sebastian Chris for the Raiders. Tommy Dearden for the Cowboys. Blake Brayley for the Sharks. Harry Grant for the Storm. And that's it for our League Head Stars and Starter Packs. Let's get rid of that and get straight into the packets. Game breakers for the Knights. Olivia Higgins. Luminous Billy Walters for the Broncos. Mercury Gahamat Shabarsky for the Broncos, number 179. Well, there you go. I wasn't wrong. Our first numbered hit for the Broncos. I said they were hiding in the packets. Luminous Joseph Tarpanay for the Raiders. Die cut Kale Arrow for the Sharks. Luminous Jamie Humphries for the Rabbitohs. Game breakers Herbie Farmworth for the Dolphins. Luminous Kuli Kefu for the Dolphins. Bang Cody Nikarima for the Dolphins. Luminous Daniel Tupou for the Roosters. Definitely hiding in the pack. 3 in a row for the Dolphins. League heads Lachlan Galvin for the Bulldogs. Luminous Greg Marzhew for the Knights. Die cuts Xavier Coates for Storm. Luminous Carl Lawton for the Cowboys. Game breakers Billy Smith for the Roosters. Luminous Fanua Pole for Tigers. League heads Angus Crichton for the Roosters. Luminous Appy Nichols for the Warriors. Bang Dylan Lucas for the Knights. Luminous Zach Lomax for the Eels. League heads Campbell Graham for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Nathan Cleary for the Panthers. Game breakers Kurt Mann for the Bulldogs. Luminous Angelina for the Bulldogs. League heads, Mich Kenny for the Panthers. Luminous Keanu Kinney for the Titans. Die cut, Luca Moretti for the Eels. Luminous Kyle Flanagan for the Dragons. Bang, Adam Reynolds for the Broncos. Luminous Jai Arrow for the Rabbitohs. League heads, Alex Twile for the Tigers. Luminous Cody Nikorima for the Dolphins. Die cuts, Sebastian Chris for the Raiders. Luminous Jason Saab for Manly. Game breakers, Jack Bostock for the Dolphins. Luminous Kale Iro for the Sharks. Bang Jai Gray for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Gehamat Shabarsky for the Broncos. League heads, Kyle Flanagan's for the Dragons. Luminous Jacob Preston for the Bulldogs. League heads, Connor Tracy for the Bulldogs. Luminous Ryan Pappenhausen for Storm. Game breakers, Hudson Young for the Raiders. Luminous Keezy Apps for the Tigers. Red Triumph for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Cody Walker for the Rabbitohs. Die cut, Payne Haas for the Broncos. Luminous Jeremiah Nanai for the Cowboys. Bang Jason Tormalolo for the Cowboys. Luminous Kalen Ponga for the Knights. League heads, Dominic Young for the Knights. Luminous Lycan King Togia for the Dragons. League heads, Stefano Uchikamanu for Storm. Luminous Brighton Nakora for the Sharks. League heads, Tommy Dearden for the Cowboys. Luminous Ezra Mam for the Broncos. Game breakers, William Kennedy for the Sharks. Luminous, Tommy Dearden for the Cowboys. Game breakers, Cameron Murray for the Rabbitohs. Luminous, Latu Fainu for Tigers. Bang, Ali Latua for the Warriors. Luminous, KO Weeks for Raiders. League heads, Herbie Farmworth for the Dolphins. Luminous, Beau Fermor for the Titans. Game breakers, Kira Dib for the Cowboys. Luminous, Stefano Utikamanu for Storm. League heads, Sebastian Chris for the Raiders. Luminous, Trent Leroux for Storm. Red Triumph, Lindsay Collins for the Roosters. Luminous, Jamal Fogarty for Manly. Let's move this pile out of our way. Bang, Ethan Strange for the Raiders. Luminous, Cameron McInnes for Sharks. Bang, Cody Walker for the Rabbitohs. Luminous, Connor Tracy for the Bulldogs. Game breakers, Jesse Colquhoun for the Sharks. Luminous, Roger Tuivasa Sheck for the Warriors. League heads, Corey Horsburgh for the Raiders. Luminous, Latrell Mitchell for the Rabbitohs. League heads, Kyle Flanagan for the Dragons. Luminous, Falago for Storm. Don't forget, guys, if you're eligible to get your entry into this week's Pick the Score giveaway, it is back to another $50 gift card. Game breakers, Munster for Storm. Luminous, Brendan Smith for the Rabbitohs. We had a lucky winner and it went off last week. So once again, if it doesn't go off this week, it will jackpot to $75 for next one. Red Triumph for the Eels. Luminous, Hugo Savala for the Roosters. As well as we now have a on sale category on the website. So all our deals are now starting to be put in there from now on. Gladiators, Xavier Coates for the Storm, number 234. Luminous, Mackenzie Wheel for the Cowboys. League Heads, Payne Huss for the Broncos. Luminous, Jaden Sewer for the Dragons. Bang, Isaac Tago for Panthers. Luminous, Jermaine Hopgood for the Eels. Game Breakers, Clinton Gutherson for the Dragons. Luminous, Alex Twile for Tigers. Die cut, Aaron Clark for the Warriors. Luminous, Tyrone Wishart for Storm. Mercury, Leka Halasima for the Warriors, number 268. Luminous, Jason Tormalolo for the Cowboys. Die cut, Lachlan Galvin for the Bulldogs. Luminous, Emma Veron for the Sharks. League Heads, Tom Gilbert for the Dolphins. Luminous, Samula Finu for the Tigers. League Heads, Adam Fanua Blake for the Sharks. Luminous, Tamale for the Raiders. Gladiators, Ruben Cotter for the Cowboys, 295. Luminous, Terrell May for the Tigers. League Heads, Blake Brayley for the Sharks. Luminous, Jack Williams for the Eels. League Heads, Stephen Crichton for the Bulldogs. Luminous, Tiana Penatani Gray for the Sharks. Murray Talagi, Bang for the Cowboys. Luminous, Lachlan Galvin for the Bulldogs. League Heads, James Fisher-Harris for the Warriors. Luminous, Adam Reynolds for the Broncos. Game Breakers, Ruben Cotter for the Cowboys. Luminous Dylan Lucas for the Knights. Game Breakers James Fisher-Harris for the Warriors. Luminous Murata Nakor for the Warriors. Daly M Predictor. League Heads Adam Dewey for the Tigers. Moses Leota Luminous for Panthers. Die Cuts Clayton Folalo for Manly. Luminous AJ Brimson for the Titans. Die Cuts Kurt Mann for the Bulldogs. Luminous Gehamat Shabarski for the Broncos. Game Breakers Zach Labour for the Cowboys. Luminous Cody Nikarima for the Dolphins. Gladiators AJ for the Rabbitohs, number 33. Luminous Jason Saab for Manly. Die Cuts Carl Lawton for the Cowboys. Luminous Kale Iro for Sharks. League Heads Jake Trbojevic for Manly. Luminous Yasmin Clydesdale for the Knights. League Heads Keanu Kinney for the Titans. Luminous Scott Drinkwater for the Cowboys. Game Breakers Ali Latua for the Warriors. Luminous Apsai Coruscant for Tigers. And Die Cuts Connolly Lumilu for Dolphins. Luminous Liam Martin for Panthers. League Heads Kurt Mann for the Bulldogs. Luminous Valami Kickout for the Bulldogs. League Heads KO Weeks for the Raiders. Luminous Nelson Asofa Solomona for Storm. Game Breakers Luciano Lua for the Dragons. Luminous Alex Johnston for the Rabbitohs. Bang Leka Helasima for the Warriors. Luminous Isabel Kelly for the Roosters. Another Dally M Predictor. Luminous Billy Walters for the Broncos. Game Breakers Ruben Garrick for Manly. Luminous Joseph Tarpanay for the Raiders. League Heads Jacob Saifiti for the Knights. Luminous Jamie Humphries for the Rabbitohs. Game Breakers Fanua Pole for the Tigers. Luminous Jacob Preston for the Bulldogs. League Heads Jackson Purdue for the Cowboys. Luminous Ryan Pappenhausen for Storm. Bang Luke Brooks for Manly. Luminous Val Holmes for the Dragons. League Heads Brian To'o for Panthers. Luminous Big Tino for Titans. Mercury Zach Labour for the Cowboys, number 366. Luminous Luca Moretti for the Eels. Game Breakers Angus Crichton for the Roosters. Luminous James Fisher-Harris for the Warriors. Game Breakers Emily Bass for the Tigers. Luminous Zach Lomax for the Eels. Bang KO Weeks for the Raiders. Luminous Nathan Cleary for Panthers. League Heads Cameron Munster for Storm. Luminous Angelina for the Bulldogs. Game Breakers Payne Huss for the Broncos. Luminous Keanu Kinney for the Titans. Die Cut Egan Butcher for the Roosters. Luminous Kyle Flanagan for the Dragons. League Heads Chance Nicole Clockstad for the Warriors. Luminous Jai Arrow for the Rabbitohs. Game Breakers Cameron Munster for the Storm. Luminous Ezra Mam for the Broncos. Red Triumph Morgan Smithies for the Raiders. Luminous Tommy Dearden for the Cowboys. Bang Hammer for the Dolphins. Luminous the two Whānau for Tigers. Alright, let's move these out of the way. Game Breakers Hudson Young for the Raiders. Luminous Xavier Willison for the Broncos. Red Triumph for the Cowboys. Luminous Tommy Turbo for Manly. League Heads Hammer for the Dolphins. Luminous Fletcher Sharp for the Knights. Die Cuts Will Penasini for the Eels. Luminous Nafor White for Roosters. League Heads Alex Twal for the Tigers. Luminous Blake Brayley for the Sharks. Bang Chanel Harris Tavita for the Warriors. Luminous Tuikami Kamika for Storm. Game Breakers Dominic Young for the Knights. Luminous Chanel Harris Tavita for the Warriors. League Heads Jacob Saifiti for the Knights. Luminous Dominic Young for the Knights. Bang Xavier Coates for the Storm. Luminous Hamoli Olika-Atu for Manly. Game Breakers Toltor Koala for Manly. Luminous Adam Dewey for the Tigers. Game Breakers Tui Kamika for Storm. Luminous Reed Marnie for the Cowboys. Oh, itchy nose. League Heads Cameron Munster for Storm. Luminous Damien Cook for the Dragons. Red Triumph Bradman Best for the Knights. Luminous Jai Grey for the Rabbitohs. League Heads Chance Nicole Clockstad for the Warriors. Luminous Alefiana Campiera for Titans. Bang Jack Bostock for Dolphins. Luminous Addo Carr for Eels. Red Triumph for the Dragons. Luminous Isaac Tago for Panthers. Game Breakers Jack Bostock for the Dolphins. Luminous Jack Bostock for the Dolphins. Bang Ruben Garrick for Manly. Luminous Lindsay Smith for Panthers. League Heads Moses Sulai for the Dragons. Sean Kepi Luminous for the Rabbitohs. League Heads Hudson Young for the Raiders. Luminous Tegan Berry for the Dragons. Game Breakers Jermaine Hopgood for the Eels. Luminous Jake Trbojevic for Manly. Game Breakers Anessa Biddle for the Sharks. Kalen Ponga Luminous for the Knights. Bang Sebastian Chris for the Raiders. Luminous Lycan King Togia for the Dragons. League Heads Gahamat Shabarsky for the Broncos. Luminous Brighton Nikora for the Sharks. Die cut Latrell Mitchell for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Samaima Torfa for the Raiders. League Heads Terrell May for the Tigers. Luminous Tamir Martin for Warriors. Game breakers, Xavier Willison for the Broncos. Luminous, Robert Toya for the Roosters. League heads, James Tedesco for the Roosters. Luminous, Keezy Apps for the Tigers. Die cuts, James Tedesco for the Roosters. Luminous, Cody Walker for the Rabbitohs. Bang, Asaya Iongi for Eels. Luminous, Jeremiah Nanai for the Cowboys. And that is the end of our starter packs. Let's move these ones out of the way, get these boxes out of the case, and get stuck into them. Alright, last two. Nice. Push them back. Tad, give yourself a bit more room. You could feel the trail. The trail was there. Alright. Box number 1. Maybe you weren't completely wrong though. Maybe there was the Trell at the 61 minute and a golden treasure in the break. Like, we will have to wait and find out. We are definitely due for a golden treasure. I mean, I've been saying that most of the release, it really feels like we haven't opened that many at all. Nicho Hynes, Red Triumph for the Sharks. Luminous, Cohen Hess for the Cowboys. Bang, Hugo Savala for the Roosters. Luminous, Lehe Hopawate for Manly. G'day, Warren. How's it going, mate? League heads, Braden Trindle for the Sharks. Luminous, Nicho Hynes for the Sharks. Game breakers, Cooley Kefu for the Dolphins. Luminous Morgan Smithies for the Raiders. Die cut Ruben Garrick for Manly. Luminous Dean Mariner for the Broncos. League heads Roger Tuivasa-Sheck for the Warriors. Luminous Isabel Kelly for the Roosters. Red Triumph Ruben Garrick for Manly. Oh, how was it? Luminous Nelson Sofa Solomona for Storm. Game Breakers Mahalia Murphy for the Eels. Luminous Alex Johnston for the Rabbitohs. League heads Murray Talagi for Cowboys. Luminous Valami Kickout for the Bulldogs. Game Breakers Alafiana Kampi Era for Titans. Luminous Apisai Coruscant for Tigers. League heads Jack Whiten for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Liam Martin for the Panthers. Me and my partner are almost going to take the kids to tonight's game, but she wouldn't have finished work in time, and the weather looks like it ain't going to be very nice either. Jermaine Isako for the Dolphins, so sort of glad we didn't buy tickets. Scott Drinkwater for the Cowboys. Gladiators Marata Nakor for the Warriors, number 239. Luminous Clinton Gutherson for the Dragons. League heads Jack Williams for the Eels. Luminous Ben Hunt for the Broncos. Die cuts Ethan Sanders for the Raiders. Luminous Asaya Yongi for the Eels. Game Breakers Jerome Hughes for Storm. Luminous Jack Whiten for the Rabbitohs. Bang Bailey Simonson for the Eels. Luminous Matt Burton for the Bulldogs. League heads Connor Watson for the Roosters. Luminous Jamie Chapman for the Titans. Die cuts for Largo for Storm. Luminous Jerome Lowe for the Tigers. Yes, dare say it would have been massive. League heads Xavier Willison for the Broncos. Luminous Hudson Young for the Raiders. I wonder how many people left early and are now kicking themselves. Game breakers Tyson Frizzell for the Knights. Luminous Leka Halasima for the Warriors. Bang Toltoku Ala for Manly. Luminous Hammer for the Dolphins. Bang Ali Latua for the Warriors. Luminous Taylor Preston for the Bulldogs. League heads Alex Twile for Tigers. Luminous Ethan Bullymore for Manly. Game breakers Tiana Penatani Gray for the Sharks. Luminous Jesse Colhoun for the Sharks. League heads Moses Sulai for the Dragons. Luminous Kurt Capewell for the Warriors. Game breakers Bradman Best for the Knights. Luminous Campbell Graham for the Rabbitohs. Die cuts Dane Gagai for the Knights. Yeah, I assume there'd still be some. Yeah, I'm not sure where still actually have packets. I keep seeing lots of 7-Elevens, Rebels. Yeah, I'm not sure who has what stock. Reuben Cotter, Luminous for the Cowboys. League heads Hudson Young for the Raiders. Luminous Dream Buller for the Tigers. Mercury Xavier Coates for Storm. Number 235. Luminous Xavier Coates for the Storm. At the fan zone, they were handing out posters and the Maccas. Oh. Game breakers, Tommy Dearden for the Cowboys. Luminous Herbie Farnworth for the Dolphins. League heads, Hammer for the Dolphins. Luminous Dylan Egan for the Dragons. Bang, Connor Tracy for the Bulldogs. Luminous Abby Church for the Eels. League heads, Isaiah Yeo for Panthers. Luminous Spencer Lenu for the Roosters. Alright, 2 packs to go in our first box. Die cut Tommy Gilbert for the Dolphins. Luminous Isaiah Yeo for Panthers. Game breakers, Loco Tonga for the Dragons. Luminous Dylan Brown for the Knights. And that's box 1 done and dusted. Only 156 packets so far. Plenty more to go. Bang, Asaya Iongi for the Eels. Luminous Jack Bostock for the Dolphins. Game breakers, Jai Gray for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Lindsay Smith for the Panthers. Die cuts, Marky Mark for the Roosters. Luminous Fletcher Sharp for the Knights. League heads, Luciano Leilua for the Dragons. Luminous Xavier Willison for the Broncos. Game breakers, Matt Burton for the Bulldogs. Luminous Tommy Turbo for Manly. League heads, Brian Kelly for Titans. Luminous, Latrell Mitchell for the Rabbitohs. Bang, Sebastian Chris for the Raiders. Luminous, Connor Tracy for the Bulldogs. Game breakers, Jalen De Groot for Titans. Luminous, Roger Tuivasa-Sheck for Warriors. League heads, Ethan Strange for the Raiders. Luminous, Tiana Penatani Gray for the Sharks. Mercury, Carl Lawton for the Cowboys. Number 129. Luminous, Terrell May for the Tigers. League heads, Cohen Hess for the Cowboys. Luminous, Jack Williams for the Eels. Bang, Jack Bostock for the Dolphins. Luminous, Stefano Utakamanu for Storm. League heads, Renato Militalo for the Sharks. Luminous, Patrick Carrigan for the Broncos. Die cuts, Jack Howarth for Storm. Luminous, Dane Gagai for the Knights. League heads, Gahamat Shabarsky for the Broncos. Luminous, Connor Watson for the Roosters. If you had break 461 in your wish list, you would have got an email notification this morning that was put into stock. Game breakers, Dylan Lucas for the Knights. Luminous, Moses Sulai for the Dragons. Bang, Leka Halasima for the Warriors. Luminous, Dylan Walker for the Eels. League heads, Jacob Saifiti for the Knights. Luminous, Zahara Temra for the Raiders. Game breakers, Anita Maynard for the Dragons. Luminous, Brian To'o for Panthers. Die cut, Morgan Smithies for the Raiders. Luminous, Luke Law Lilly for the Tigers. League heads, Luke Metcalf for the Warriors. Luminous Murray Talagi for Cowboys. Game breakers, Gehamat Shabarsky for the Broncos. Luminous Chanel Harris Tavita for the Warriors. Gladiators, Asaya Yo for Panthers, number 93. Blake Brayley, Luminous for the Sharks. League heads, Will Penasini for the Eels. Luminous Tui Kamikamika for Storm. Die cut, Liam Martin for Panthers. Luminous Falago for Storm. League heads, Connolly Lou for Dolphins. Luminous Brendan Smith for the Rabbitohs. Red Triumph, Blaze Talagi for Panthers. Luminous Tamale for the Raiders. Game breakers, Robert Toya for the Roosters. Luminous Emma Veron for the Sharks. League heads, Lindsay Smith for Panthers. Luminous Samula Finu for the Tigers. Bang Dean Mariner for the Broncos. Luminous Ray Stone for Dolphins. Game breakers, Isaac Tago for Panthers. Luminous Stephen Crichton for the Bulldogs. Red Triumph, Jerome Hughes for Storm. Luminous Philip Semi for the Titans. Game breakers, Saya Yongi for the Eels. Luminous Jake Trebojevic for Manly. Bang Luke Brooks for Manly. Luminous Sean Kepi for the Rabbitohs. League heads, James Tedesco for Roosters. Luminous Tegan Berry for the Dragons. Alright, last pack for box number 2. Die cuts Luke Lolili for Tigers. Luminous Nafor White for Roosters. Box number 3. Game breakers Jason Tormalolo for the Cowboys. Luminous Yasmin Clydesdale for the Knights. League heads Val Holmes for the Dragons. Luminous Val Holmes for the Dragons. Bang Nathan Cleary for Panthers. Luminous Big Tino for Titans. Die cuts Aleka Halasima for the Warriors. Luminous Kale Iro for Sharks. League heads Bailey Haywood for the Bulldogs. Luminous Cody Nikarima for the Dolphins. Game breakers Junior Paulo for the Eels. Luminous Jason Saab for Manly. Bang Matty Burton for the Bulldogs. Luminous Ryan Pappenhausen for Storm. League heads Ezra Mam for the Broncos. Luminous Gahamat Shabarsky for the Broncos. Mercury Sebastian Chris for the Raiders, number 102. Luminous Jacob Preston for the Bulldogs. Red Triumph for Manly. Luminous Jeremiah Nanai for the Cowboys. Bang Ezra Mam for the Broncos. Luminous Jerome Luai for the Tigers. League heads James Fisher Harris for the Warriors. Luminous Hudson Young for the Raiders. Die cuts Max King for the Bulldogs. Luminous Aleka Halasima for the Warriors. Bang Jareem Buller for the Tigers. Luminous Hammer for the Dolphins. Game Breakers Jack Whiten for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Cohen Hess for the Cowboys. League Heads Harry Grant for the Storm. Luminous Nicho Hynes for the Sharks. Game Breakers Jacob Carraz for the Bulldogs. Luminous Lehe Hopawate for Manly. Die cut Jack Hetherington for the Knights. Luminous Morgan Smithies for the Raiders. League Heads Keon Colin for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Dean Mariner for the Broncos. Game Breakers Keezy Apps for the Tigers. Luminous Isabel Kelly for the Roosters. Bang Nicho Hynes for the Sharks. Luminous Nelson Asafa Solomona for Storm. League Heads Greg Marzu for the Knights. Luminous Alex Johnston for the Rabbitohs. Red Triumph Renato Mulatalo for the Sharks. Luminous Valami Kickout for the Bulldogs. League Heads Isaiah Katoa for the Dolphins. Luminous Apisai Coruscant for Tigers. Gladiators Ryan Pappenhausen for Storm number 165. Luminous Asai Yo for Panthers. League Heads Marky Mark for Roosters. Luminous Dylan Brown for the Knights. Game Breakers Mitchell Barnett for the Warriors. Luminous Clinton Gutherson for the Dragons. League Heads Tom Starling for the Raiders. Luminous Ben Hunt for the Broncos. Game Breakers Connor Watson for the Roosters. Luminous Asaya Yongi for the Eels. Die cuts Sean Kepi for Rabbitohs. Luminous Jack Whiten for the Rabbitohs. Game Breakers Tyron Wishart for Storm. Luminous Matt Burton for the Bulldogs. League Heads Moses Leota for Panthers. Luminous Jamie Chapman for Titans. Game Breakers Isaiah Yo for Panthers. Luminous Liam Martin for Panthers. Die cut Joash for the Eels. Luminous Scott Drinkwater for the Cowboys. League Heads Milwaukee Fodawaika for Titans. Luminous Luca Moretti for the Eels. Bang Campbell Graham for the Rabbitohs. Luminous James Fisher Harris for the Warriors. And that's box number 3 done and dusted. No luck with hitting anything for the table out of the case. Hopefully we can start picking up a few from here. Die cut Jojo Fafita for Titans. Luminous Keanu Kinney for the Titans. League Heads Cameron Murray for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Kyle Flanagan for the Dragons. Game Breakers Angus Crichton for the Roosters. Luminous Angelina for the Bulldogs. Die cuts William Kennedy for the Sharks. Luminous Corey Horsburgh for the Raiders. Bang Scott Drinkwater for the Cowboys. Zach Lomax Luminous for the Eels. Red Triumph for the Titans. Luminous Nathan Cleary for Panthers. League Heads Cameron Munster for Storm. Luminous Jamie Humphries for the Rabbitohs. Bang for Largo for Storm. Luminous Cassie Hiku for the Eels. League Heads Brian To'o for Panthers. Luminous Marky Mark for Roosters. Game Breakers Zach Labutt for the Cowboys. Luminous Billy Walters for the Broncos. League Heads Jason Saab for Manly. Luminous Joseph Tarpanay for Raiders. Bang Hugo Savala for Roosters. Luminous Greg Marshall for the Knights. League Heads Robert Toya for the Roosters. Luminous Cooley Kefu for the Dolphins. Game Breakers Luciano Leilua for the Dragons. Luminous Tom Gilbert for the Dolphins. Game Breakers Fanua Pole for the Tigers. Luminous Daniel Tupou for the Roosters. Die cuts Dylan Lucas for the Knights. Luminous Appy Nichols for the Warriors. League Heads Jacob Little for the Dragons. Luminous Carl Lawton for the Cowboys. Game Breakers Anessa Biddle for the Sharks. Luminous Fanua Pole for the Tigers. League Heads KO Weeks for the Raiders. Luminous Wade Egan for the Warriors. Our golden triumph for the case. Luminous Cameron McInnes for Sharks. League heads, Alifiana Campiera for Titans. Luminous Trent Lowe for Storm. Bang Phoenix Crossland for the Knights. Luminous Jamal Fogarty for Manly. Red Triumph Junior Paulo for the Eels. Luminous Latu Finu for the Tigers. Game Breakers Xavier Willison for the Broncos. Luminous AJ Brimson for the Titans. League heads Joseph Tarpanay for the Raiders. Luminous Marata Nakor for the Warriors. Gladiators Jaden Campbell for the Titans, number 291. Luminous Moses Leotta for Panthers. Bang Clinton Gutherson for the Dragons. Luminous Ezra Mam for the Broncos. League heads Jeremiah Nanai for the Cowboys. Luminous Jermaine Hopgood for the Eels. Game Breakers Tui Kamika for Storm. Luminous Mackenzie Wheel for the Cowboys. Bang Jaden Campbell for the Titans. Luminous Jaden Sewer for the Dragons. League heads Terrell May for the Tigers. Luminous Tommy Dearden for the Cowboys. League heads Max King for the Bulldogs. Luminous, Dylan Lucas for the Knights. Mercury, Herbie Farnworth for the Dolphins. Number 136. Luminous, Lachlan Gowan for the Bulldogs. Game Breakers, Ali Latua for the Warriors. Luminous, Jai Arrow for the Rabbitohs. Game Breakers, Tolso Koala for Manly. And Adam Reynolds, Luminous for Manly. Brendan Pakura, die cut for the Broncos. No number. And Hugo Savala, Luminous for the Roosters. Alright, another box down. Alright, box number 5. Die cut Sione Katoa for the Sharks. Luminous Katoni Stags for the Broncos. Game Breakers, Lindsay Smith for Panthers. Luminous Asaya Papalihi for Panthers. Jason Saab Bang for Manly. Luminous Jacob Carraz for the Bulldogs. League heads, Morgan Smithies for the Raiders. Luminous Alex Seafarth for Tigers. Harry Grant, die cut for Storm. Luminous Keon Kolometangi for the Rabbitohs. League heads, Mich Kenny for Panthers. Luminous Ali Latour for the Warriors. Bang Dean Mariner for the Broncos. Luminous Jordan Ricky for the Broncos. Game Breakers, Shaylee Bent for the Titans. Luminous Jessica Surgis for the Roosters. League heads, Payne Haas for the Broncos. Luminous Mitchell Moses for the Eels. Red Triumph, Jareem Bula for the Tigers. Luminous Harry Grant for Storm. League heads, Roger Tuivasa-Sheck for the Warriors. Luminous Renato Mulitalo for the Sharks. Game Breakers, Mitchell Moses for the Eels. Luminous Jacob Sofiti for the Knights. Lycan King Togia Bang for the Dragons. Luminous Zach Labert for the Cowboys. Game Breakers, Cameron McInnes for the Sharks. Luminous Luke Metcalf for the Warriors. Die cuts, Big Tino for Titans. Luminous Zahara Sarah Togatsuki. League heads, Nico Hines for the Sharks. Connolly Luminous for the Dolphins. Bang Bailey Hayward for the Bulldogs. Samuel Stone Street, Luminous for the Sharks. Game Breakers, Fletcher Sharp for Knights. Luminous, Tanila Paseka for Manly. League Heads, Tommy Dearden for the Cowboys. Luminous, Sam Walker for the Roosters. Mercury, Dylan Egan for the Dragons, number 136. Luminous, John Bateman for the Cowboys. Die Cuts, Ezra Mam for the Broncos. Luminous, Jaden Salmon for the Bulldogs. League Heads, Spencer Lenu for the Roosters. Luminous, Cameron Munster for Storm. Game Breakers, Val Holmes for the Dragons. Luminous, Brian Kelly for the Titans. League Heads, Wayne Egan for the Warriors. Luminous, Bailey Simonson for the Eels. Bang, Alefiana Campiera for Titans. Luminous, Jesse Southwell for the Knights. League Heads, Falago for Storm. Luminous, Luciano Late Lua for the Dragons. Finton Gutherson die cut for the Dragons. Blaze Talagi, Luminous for Panthers. Red Triumph for the Knights. Luminous, Tom Starling for the Raiders. Upside down, my bad. Game Breakers, Bree Chester for the Cowboys. Luminous Tamika Upton for the Broncos. Bang Jack Bostock for the Dolphins. Luminous Jesse Aramian for the Sharks. League Heads Samula Fainu for the Tigers. Luminous Mitchell Barnett for the Warriors. Game Breakers Sanua Taruva for Tigers. Luminous Ben Chavovic for Manly. League Heads Ruben Garrick for Manly. Luminous Sanua Taruva for Tigers. Excuse me. Game Breakers Jamie Humphries for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Will Penasini for the Eels. Gladiators RCG for Titans number 272. Luminous Jonah Pezzett for Storm. And last packet for the box. League Heads Mitchell Moses for the Eels and Luminous Matthew Tomoko for the Raiders. Alright, I'm going to quickly duck up to the toilet. I will be back in just a moment. We're back. That's what we're looking for. No, wrong button. There we go. Alright. Get back in. Box number 6. Game breakers, Stephen Crichton for the Bulldogs, Luminous, Xavier Savage for the Raiders, Bang, Herbie Farmworth for the Dolphins, Luminous, Georgia Hale for the Titans, League Heads, Dylan Walker for the Eels, Luminous, Josh Kerr for the Dragons, Gladiators, Morgan Smithies for the Raiders, number 21. Luminous, Luke Brooks for Manly. Die Cut, Jerome Lowe for the Tigers. Luminous, Jesse Southwell for the Knights. Game Breakers, Tamale for the Raiders. Luminous, Luciano Leilua for Dragons. Mercury, Sean Russell for the Eels, number 343. Luminous, Katoni Staggs for the Broncos. League Heads, Cody Walker for the Rabbitohs. Luminous, Siapapalihi for the Panthers. Game Breakers, Dane Gagai for the Knights. Luminous, Jacob Carraz for the Bulldogs. Bang, Ruben Garrick for Manly. Luminous, Alex Seyfarth for Tigers. League Heads, Reece Walsh for the Broncos. Luminous, Asaya Katoa for Dolphins. Red Triumph, Morgan Smithies for the Raiders. Luminous, Ruben Garrick for Manly. League Heads, Fletcher Sharp for the Knights. Luminous, Mich Kenny for Panthers. Game breakers, Abby Church for the Eels. Luminous and Fanua Blake for the Sharks. League heads, Jackson Purdue for the Cowboys. Luminous Bailey Haywood for the Bulldogs. Die cut, Matthew Lodge for Manly. Luminous Tyson Frizzell for the Knights. League heads, Keanu Kinney for the Titans. Luminous Jalen DeGroot for Titans. Bang, Chanel Harris to Vita for the Warriors. Luminous Brian Kelly for the Titans. League heads, Brighton Nakora for the Sharks. Luminous Keon Kolomatangi for the Rabbitohs. Die cuts, Ali Latua for the Warriors. Luminous Ali Latua for the Warriors. Game breakers, Daniel Tupou for the Roosters. Luminous Jordan Ricky for the Broncos. Bang, Zach Lomax for the Eels. Luminous Jessica Surgis for the Roosters. League heads, Jaden Sewer for the Dragons. Luminous Mitchell Moses for the Eels. Game breaker is Luke Brooks for Manly. Luminous Connolly Lumi Lou for Dolphins. League heads, Sam Walker for the Roosters. Luminous Samuel Stonestreet for the Sharks. Game breakers, Julia Robinson for the Broncos. Luminous Tanila Paseka for Manly. Bang, Stephen Crichton for the Bulldogs. Luminous Sam Walker for the Roosters. League heads, Jacob Carraz for the Bulldogs. Luminous John Bateman for the Cowboys. Die cuts, Lachlan Ilias for the Dragons. Luminous Jamin Salmon for the Bulldogs. Game breakers, Tom Gilbert for the Dolphins. Luminous Cameron Munster for Storm. Red Triumph, Stephen Crichton for the Bulldogs. Luminous Harry Grant for Storm. Die cut, Cohen Hess for the Cowboys. Luminous Renato Militalo for the Sharks. Game breakers, Big Tino for Titans. Luminous and Jacob Saifiti for the Knights. Premiership Predictor. League heads, Jake Trbojevic for Manly. Luminous Zach Labert for the Cowboys. Bang, Xavier Savage for the Raiders. Luminous Loco Pacifici Tonga for the Dragons. League heads, Fanua Pole for the Tigers. Luminous Bailey Simonson for the Eels. Alright, box done. Next one. Bang, Ethan Strange for the Raiders. Luminous Dylan Walker for the Eels. Game breakers, Phoenix Crossland for the Knights. Luminous Zahara Tamara for the Raiders. League heads, Stephen Crichton for the Bulldogs. Luminous Brian To'o for Panthers. Mercury Cameron McInnes for the Sharks, number 236. Luminous Luke Lolili for Tigers. Excuse me. League heads, AJ Brimson for the Titans. Luminous Murray Talagi for Cowboys. Game breakers, Lachlan Ilias for Dragons. Luminous Chanel Harris Tavita for the Warriors. League heads, Blake Brayley for the Sharks. Luminous Dane Gagai for the Knights. League heads, Lindsay Collins for the Roosters. Blake Brayley, Luminous for the Sharks. Die cuts, Alex Johnston for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Tui Kamika for Storm. League heads, Damien Cook for the Dragons. Luminous Jake Trbojevic for Manly. Bang, Isaac Tago for Panthers. Luminous Sean Kepe for the Rabbitohs. Bang, Cody Nikarima for the Dolphins. Luminous Patrick Carrigan for Broncos. Game breakers, Blake Brayley for the Sharks. Luminous Tegan Berry for the Dragons. Red Triumph for the Storm. Luminous Nafor White for the Roosters. Game breakers, Zach Lomax for the Eels. Luminous Philip Sami for the Titans. Red Triumph, Scott Drinkwater for the Cowboys. Luminous Hugo Savala for the Roosters. Die cuts, Jermaine Isako for Dolphins. Luminous Falago for Storm. League heads, Jermaine Hopgood for the Eels. Luminous Brendan Smith for the Rabbitohs. Game breakers, Taylor Preston for the Bulldogs. Luminous Tamale for the Raiders. Bang, Dylan Lucas for the Knights. Luminous Emma Veron for the Sharks. Gladiators, Nico Hines for Sharks. Number 163. Luminous, Samula Fainu for Tigers. Die cuts, Moses Leota for Panthers. Luminous, Connor Watson for the Roosters. League heads, Nelson Asafa Solomona for Storm. Luminous, Moses Sulai for the Dragons. Game breakers, Jermaine Isako for Dolphins. Luminous, Trent Leroux for Storm. League heads, Sebastian Chris for the Raiders. Luminous, Jamal Fogarty for Manly. Bang, James Tedesco for the Roosters. Luminous, AJ Brimson for the Titans. League heads, Bradman Best for the Knights. Luminous, Ray Stone for the Dolphins. Game breakers, Jackson Purdue for the Cowboys. Luminous, Marata Nakor for the Warriors. League heads, Ruben Cotter for the Cowboys. Luminous, Moses Leota for Panthers. League heads, Dylan Edwards for Panthers. Luminous, Jermaine Hopgood for the Eels. Die cuts, Lehe Hopawate for Manly. Luminous, Mackenzie Wheel for Cowboys. Game breakers, Milwaukee Fodawaika for the Cowboys, Titans. Luminous, Jaden Sewer for the Dragons. Bang, Adam Reynolds for the Broncos. Luminous, Dylan Lucas for the Knights. League heads, Jai Arrow for the Rabbitohs. Luminous, Lachlan Galvin for the Bulldogs. Game breakers, Ryan Pappenhausen for the Storm. Luminous Adam Reynolds for the Broncos. And last packet for the box. Die cuts, James Fisher-Harris for the Warriors. Luminous Stephen Crichton for the Bulldogs. Alright, next box. Up the Blues. Bang Jai Gray for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Blaze Tulagi for Panthers. League heads, Connor Watson for the Roosters. Luminous Reed Marnie for the Cowboys. Bang Dylan Lucas for the Knights. Luminous Damien Cook for the Dragons. Game breakers, Jermaine Hopgood for the Eels. Luminous Adam Dewey for the Tigers. Game breakers, Jaden Sewer for the Dragons. Luminous Tom Starling for the Raiders. Triumph Murray Talagi for the Cowboys. Luminous Tamika Upton for the Broncos. League heads, Kurt Mann for the Bulldogs. Luminous Dominic Young for the Knights. Die cut, Keon Kolomatangi for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Hamoli Olika Atu for Manly. League heads, Alex Twal for Tigers. Luminous Lindsay Collins for the Roosters. Red Triumph for the Warriors. Luminous Mawaki Fodawaika for the Titans. League heads, Chance Nicole Klokstad for the Warriors. Luminous Jesse Ramian for the Sharks. League Heads Jack Whiten for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Ali Briganshaw for the Broncos. Game Breakers Jack Bostock for the Dolphins. Luminous Jermaine Isako for the Dolphins. Bang Adam Reynolds for the Broncos. Luminous Jerome Hughes for Storm. League Heads Braden Trindle for the Sharks. Luminous Casey McLean for Panthers. Game Breakers Chance Nico Clockstad for the Warriors. Luminous Mitchell Barnett for the Warriors. League Heads Sam Verrills for the Titans. Luminous Jackson Purdue for the Cowboys. Game Breakers John Bateman for the Cowboys. Luminous Regan Campbell Gillard for the Titans. Die cuts Jack Williams for the Eels. Luminous Ben Trebojevic for Manly. League Heads Ryan Pappenhausen for Storm. Luminous Sanua Taruva for Tigers. Game Breakers Tegan Demick for the Bulldogs. Luminous Will Penasini for the Eels. Die cuts Casey McLean for Panthers. Luminous Chance Nico Clockstad for the Warriors. League Heads Stefano Ushkamanu for Storm. Luminous Ethan Sanders for the Raiders. Bang Dylan Edwards for Panthers. Luminous Jonah Pezzett for Storm. Bang Episode Coruscant for Tigers. Luminous William Kennedy for the Sharks. Gladiators Ezra Mam for the Broncos, number 514. Luminous Saitili Tupanua for the Bulldogs. Game Breakers Hudson Young for the Raiders. Luminous Sean Russell for the Eels. League Heads Cody Nikarima for the Dolphins. Luminous Matthew Tomoko for the Raiders. Upside Down Mercury, it's number 242, Mich Kenny for Panthers. Luminous Zali Hopkins for the Dragons. Bang, Kale Iro for the Sharks. Luminous Kurt Mann for Bulldogs. League Heads Hudson Young for the Raiders. Luminous Jermaine McEwen for the Knights. Dally M Predictor. Luminous Luke Metcalf for the Warriors. Game Breakers Tegan Dimmick for the Bulldogs. Luminous James Tedesco for the Roosters. League Heads Xavier Willison for the Broncos. Luminous Max Plath for the Dolphins. Die cuts Jerome Hughes for Storm. Luminous Cameron Murray for the Rabbitohs. Game Breakers Dylan Edwards for Panthers. Luminous Sarah Togatuki for Tigers. Alright, another box done and dusted. Four to go. Feel like there's an extra one slipped in there today. That's alright. We will get them done. Bang, Marky Mark for the Roosters. Luminous Jaden Campbell for the Titans. League Heads Valami Kickout for the Bulldogs. Luminous Ruben Cotter for the Cowboys. League Heads Latrell Mitchell for the Rabbitohs. Luminous KO Weeks for the Raiders. Game Breakers Patricia for the Warriors. Luminous Bo Fermor for the Titans. Bang Xavier Coates for Storm. Luminous Jason Tormalolo for the Cowboys. Game Breakers Sophie Holloman for Raiders. Luminous Taylor Preston for the Bulldogs. League Heads Hammer for the Dolphins. Luminous Alex Twal for the Tigers. Gladiators Spencer Lenu for the Roosters. Number 373. Tyron Wishart Luminous for the Storm. Game Breakers Corey Horsburgh for the Raiders. Luminous Kira Dibb for Cowboys. League Heads Liam Martin for Panthers. Luminous Braden Trindle for the Sharks. League Heads Adam Reynolds for Broncos. Luminous Ethan Bullymore for Manly. Die Cuts Dean Mariner for the Broncos. Luminous Jesse Colhoun for the Sharks. Game Breakers Terrell May for the Tigers. Luminous Sam Verrills for the Titans. Bang Damien Cook for the Dragons. Luminous Bradman Best for the Knights. League Heads Jerome Luai for the Tigers. Luminous Kurt Catewell for Warriors. Bang Bradman Best for the Knights. Luminous Campbell Graham for the Rabbitohs. League Heads Cameron McInnes for the Sharks. Luminous Junior Paulo for the Eels. Die Cuts Val Holmes for the Dragons. Luminous Felice Kafusi for Dolphins. Game Breakers Max Plath for Dolphins. Luminous Ethan Strange for the Raiders. Die Cuts Oregon Kafusi for Sharks. Luminous Dream Buller for the Tigers. Mercury Jaden Campbell for the Titans, number 370. Luminous Billy Smith for the Roosters. League Heads Jerome Hughes for Storm. Luminous Max King for the Bulldogs. Game Breakers Scott Drinkwater for the Cowboys. Luminous Elishan Albert Jones for the Warriors. Game Breakers Billy Walters for the Broncos. Luminous Xavier Coates for Storm. Red Triumph for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Herbie Farmworth for the Dolphins. Bang Tommy Dearden for the Cowboys. Luminous Reese Walsh for the Broncos. League Heads Kalen Ponga for the Knights. Luminous Tolto Koala for Manly. League Heads Junior Polo for the Eels. Luminous Dylan Egan for the Dragons. Game Breakers Braden Trindle for the Sharks. Luminous Dylan Edwards for Panthers. Bo Fermor die cuts for Titans. Luminous Payne Haas for Broncos. League Heads Chanel Harris Tavita for the Warriors. Luminous Sebastian Chris for the Raiders. Game Breakers Tommy Turbo for Manly. Luminous Phoenix Crossland for the Knights. Bang, AJ Brimson for the Titans. Luminous, Abby Church for the Eels. League heads, Molly Olaka-Atu for Manly. Luminous, Spencer Leonard for the Roosters. Instant win. Angus Crichton, Luminous for the Roosters. Red Triumph for Gutho. Luminous, Lachlan Elias for the Dragons. And that's the end of another box. Alright, 3 to go. Game breakers, Brian Kelly for the Titans. Luminous, Keezy Apps for Tigers. Gladiators, Jordan Ricky for the Broncos, number 61. Luminous, Cody Walker for the Rabbitohs. League heads, Apasai Coruscant for the Tigers. Luminous, Brighton Nickera for the Sharks. Bang, Nathan Cleary for Panthers. Luminous, Kalen Ponga for the Knights. League heads, Big Tino for the Titans. Luminous, Saitili Tupanua for the Bulldogs. Game breakers, Damien Cook for the Dragons. Luminous, Lycan King Togia for the Dragons. Die cuts, Tolator Koala for Manly. Luminous, Isaac Tago for Panthers. Bang, Kalen Ponga for the Knights. Luminous, Sean Russell for the Eels. League heads, Clinton Gutherson for the Dragons. Luminous Zali Hopkins for the Dragons. League Heads Lehe Hopawate for Manly. Luminous Alifiana Kampi Era for Titans. Game Breakers Yasmin Clydesdale for the Knights. Luminous Addo Carr for the Eels. League Heads Joash for the Eels. Luminous Robert Toya for the Roosters. Die cuts Spencer Lenu for the Roosters. Luminous Kurt Mann for the Bulldogs. Game Breakers Nico Hines for the Sharks. Luminous Samima Torfa for the Raiders. Bang Chanel Harris Tavita for the Warriors. Luminous Tamir Martin for the Warriors. Game Breakers Max King for the Bulldogs. Luminous Jermaine McEwen for the Knights. League Heads William Kennedy for the Sharks. Luminous Jai Gray for the Rabbitohs. Red Triumph Cooley Kefu for the Dolphins. Luminous Reed Marnie for the Cowboys. Game Breakers Hammer for the Dolphins. Luminous Damien Cook for the Dragons. Red Triumph Marky Mark for the Roosters. Luminous James Tedesco for the Roosters. League Heads Scott Drinkwater for the Cowboys. Luminous Adam Dewey for the Tigers. Die cuts Isaiah Katoa for the Dolphins. Luminous Dominic Young for the Knights. Bang Marky Mark for the Roosters. Luminous Hamoli Olika Atu for Manly. League Heads Connor Tracy for the Bulldogs. Luminous Max Plath for Dolphins. League heads, Alex Johnston for the Rabbitohs. Lindsay Collins for the Roosters. Game breakers, Hamoli Olaka'atu for Manly. Luminous Mawaki Fodawaika for Titans. Scott Drinkwater for the Cowboys. Luminous Cameron Murray for the Rabbitohs. League heads, Dylan Lucas for the Knights. Luminous Ali Brigginshaw for the Broncos. Die cut Jason Tormalolo for the Cowboys. Luminous Jermaine Isako for Dolphins. Game breakers, Nelson Asafa Solomona for Storm. Luminous Jerome Hughes for Storm. League heads, Ben Hunt for the Broncos. Luminous RCG for Titans. Bang, Alex Johnston for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Casey McLean for Panthers. League heads, Jermaine Isako for Dolphins. Luminous Chance Nicole Klokstad for the Warriors. Dally M Predictor. Luminous Jackson Purdue for the Cowboys. Mercury Marky Mark for the Roosters, number 428. Ethan Sanders, Luminous for the Raiders. And last packet for the Fox. Game breakers, Ezra Mam for the Broncos. Luminous William Kennedy for the Sharks. Quickly tidy these ones up. Alright, box number 11, second last box of the break. Red Triumph, Val Holmes for the Dragons. Luminous Jack Bostock for the Dolphins. League heads, Corey Horsburgh for the Raiders. Luminous Lindsay Smith for Panthers. Game breakers, Brian To'o for Panthers. Luminous Fletcher Sharp for the Knights. Gladiators Tolator Koala for Manly, number 152. Luminous Connor Tracy for the Bulldogs. League Heads John Bateman for the Cowboys. Luminous Xavier Willison for the Broncos. Bang Murray Talagi for Cowboys. Luminous Tom Trbojevic for Manly. Game Breakers Connor Tracy for the Bulldogs. Luminous Roger Tuivasa Sheck for the Warriors. League Heads Nathan Cleary for Panthers. Luminous Latrell Mitchell for the Rabbitohs. League Heads Jareem Buller for the Tigers. Luminous Kira Dibb for the Cowboys. Bang William Kennedy for the Sharks. Luminous Braden Trindle for the Sharks. Bang Tyron Wisher for the Storm. Luminous Tiana Penatani Gray for the Sharks. League Heads Patrick Carrigan for the Broncos. Luminous Terrell May for the Tigers. Die Cuts Scott Drinkwater for the Cowboys. Luminous Jack Williams for the Eels. Game Breakers Luke Metcalf for the Warriors. Luminous Sam Verrills for the Titans. Die Cuts Angus Crichton for the Roosters. Luminous Bradman Best for the Knights. League Heads Herbie Farmworth for the Dolphins. Luminous Junior Paulo for the Eels. Game Breakers Apasai Coruscant for Tigers. Luminous Felice Kafusi for Dolphins. Game breakers, Tamika Upton for Broncos. Luminous Stefano Utakamanu for Storm. Bang Fanua Pole for Tigers. Luminous Ethan Strange for Raiders. League heads, Luke Brooks for Manly. Luminous Lachlan Ilias for Dragons. Game breakers, Hugo Savala for the Roosters. Luminous Billy Smith for Roosters. Mercury, Campbell Graham for the Rabbitohs. 333. Luminous Larson Albert Jones for the Warriors. League heads, Connor Tracy for the Bulldogs. Luminous Max King for the Bulldogs. Red Triumph for the Rabbitohs. Luminous KO Weeks for the Raiders. League heads, Mitchell Barnett for the Warriors. Luminous Beau Fermor for Titans. Bang Cody Walker for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Reece Walsh for the Broncos. Game breakers, KO Weeks for the Raiders. Luminous Tolator Koala for Manly. League heads, Sam Verrills for the Titans. Luminous Dylan Edwards for Panthers. Die cuts, Ben Hunt for the Broncos. Luminous Payne Huss for the Broncos. League heads, Dominic Young for the Knights. Luminous Sebastian Chris for the Raiders. Bang Jalen DeGroot for Titans. Luminous Jason Tormalolo for the Cowboys. Game breakers, Lehe Hopewate for Manly. Luminous Phoenix Crossland for the Knights. Clive Churchill Predictor. Luminous Angus Crichton for the Roosters. League heads Stefano Utokumanu for Storm. Luminous Jaden Campbell for the Titans. Alright, 2 packets left for this box. Game breakers Cody Walker for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Alex Twal for Tigers. Die cut Episode Coruscant for Tigers. Luminous Tyron Wishart for Storm. Alright, last box. Let's get it done. Mercury Kurt Cakewell for the Warriors. Number 16, a nice low one. Luminous Loco Tonga for the Dragons. Game breakers Latrell Mitchell for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Luke Brooks for Manly. League heads Adam Dewey for Tigers. Luminous Isaiah Katoa for Dolphins. Bang Joash for Eels. Luminous Xavier Savage for the Rabbitohs. Bang Tamale for the Raiders. Luminous Nathan Cleary for Panthers. Game breakers Tarpanay for Raiders. Luminous Georgia Hale for the Titans. League heads Xavier Coates for Storm. Luminous Josh Kerr for Dragons. Game breakers Sebastian Chris for the Raiders. Luminous Jamie Humphries for the Rabbitohs. League heads Lachlan Galvin for the Bulldogs. Luminous Billy Walters for the Broncos. Die cuts Xavier Savage for the Raiders. Luminous Tarpanay for the Raiders. Die cut of Alami Kickout for the Bulldogs. Luminous Ruben Garrick for Manly. Bang Xavier Coates for Storm. Luminous Mich Kenny for Panthers. League heads, Ethan Bullymore for Manly. Luminous Adam Fanua Blake for the Sharks. Game breakers, Tamir Martin for the Warriors. Luminous Bailey Haywood for the Bulldogs. League heads, Regan Campbell Gillard for the Titans. Luminous Greg Marshew for the Knights. Gladiators, Jermaine Isako for the Dolphins, number 92. Luminous Tyson Frizzell for the Knights. League heads, Campbell Graham for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Jalen DeGroot for Titans. Die cut, Dominic Young for the Knights. Luminous Corey Horsburgh for the Raiders. Game breakers, Wade Egan for the Warriors. Luminous Cooley Kefu for the Dolphins. Bang Jesse Ramian for the Sharks. Luminous Cassie Hiku for the Eels. League heads, Zach Lomax for the Eels. Luminous Marky Mark for the Roosters. Game breakers, Patrick Carrigan for the Broncos. Luminous Tommy Gilbert for the Dolphins. Bang Damien Cook for the Dragons. Luminous Daniel Tupou for the Roosters. Die cuts, Mitchell Moses for the Eels. Luminous Wade Egan for the Warriors. League heads, Phoenix Crossland for the Knights. Luminous Latu Fainu for the Tigers. We're getting towards the end, Chris. I don't know about this. Game breakers, Ben Trebojevic for Manly. Luminous Ezra Mam for the Broncos. Been waiting all break to find this golden treasure. Bang. Sanua Taruva for Tigers. Tommy Dearden, Luminous for the Cowboys. League heads, Angus Crichton for the Roosters. Luminous, Appy Nichols for the Warriors. We're not quite there yet, but we're getting close. We're going to find it. Better pop up shortly. And I don't like your chances after hitting a Dally M predictor. Carl Lawton, Luminous for the Cowboys. League heads, Aden Fanua Blake for the Sharks. Luminous Jai Arrow for the Rabbitohs. Red Triumph, Mitchell Barnett for the Warriors. Luminous Keanu Kinney for the Titans. League heads, Kyle Flanagan for the Dragons. It's awesome when you hit a golden treasure, even better when you hit two. Shush you. Luminous Fanua Pole for the Tigers. Listen to you. 2 golden treasures, 2 instant wins. Red Triumph for the Broncos. As I told you, let me know when you buy your lotto ticket. I'll go halves with you. Cameron McInnes for the Sharks. Game breakers, Alex Seyfarth for the Tigers. Luminous Kyle Flanagan for the Dragons. 2 to go. League heads, Tom Gilbert for the Dolphins. Luminous Angelina for the Bulldogs. It's funny, like the amount that we've opened in the breaks and for the website. Most of the golden treasures on the website come from the breaks. We've managed to get a scan of them before we send them out. Game breakers, Olivia Koenig for the Roosters. And Zach Lomax, Luminous for the Eels to finish us off. Alright, let's get through the hits on the table. A lot of Dally M predictors today. We've got 2 in our starter packs. Starting off with number 83, Val Holmes for the Dragons. Next up, number 216, Isaiah Yeo for Panthers. Golden Triumph, number 68 for the Dragons, Val Holmes. So we used to have a saying around here, Titans always hits. Lately, with Warren, it's been Dragons always hits. He's had a good run. Number 155, Premiership Predictor for the Sharks. Dally M, number 26, Terrell May for the Tigers. And our instant win, once again, for the Tigers, Joel Hardie. $160 wild card for the Rabbitohs. We have 2 to go. Clive Churchill predictor number 222 for the Knights. Brian Riddell with the Raz win. Alright, lucky last hit. Another Dally M predictor number 91. Xavier Savage for the Raiders. Alright, before we say goodbye, we have one last thing to do, and that's to randomize our bonuses. Let's get them back in front so we can check them out. And the album, don't forget the album. I know, I thought it came with 4 packets, but then I seen in one of them that there was 5. I think there's 5 bonus sticker packs in the album. So let's get that done. I just need to load the team list in and I will change the screen over. Alright, there we go. It is ready. Everyone is in and ready to go. 3 times around the merry-go-round. That is number 1. That is number 2. And here is number 3. Joel Hardie with the Panthers taking it home today. Congratulations. Thank you to everyone for being a part of the break and everyone that tuned in, especially those that said hello. Until the next one, guys, that is it. That is